Hello, who is it?
Hello, Europe calling.
Oh, great, we're born Europeans. Good evening, Europeans. This is Europe Calling, and we are born Europeans. My name is Sanja Nicolin, and I will be your host tonight on behalf of Friedrich Hebert Stiftung and the Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia. Europe Calling is an umbrella title for events that are organized throughout Europe, and this is the first such event taking place in Serbia, and this year's general theme is Who Holds Europe Together? From Serbia, we are sending a message that contribution of women to development of European societies is inadequately recognized. Tonight, we want to start a dialogue on development. We're addressing women and men and representatives of institutions throughout Europe. On any given day, all you hear about us are the official views. All we hear is bureaucratic talk. For us, Europe is much more than that. Let us unpack the story tonight. We're putting forward the thesis that Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia is Serbia's hidden jewel that can contribute in a major way to our shared development objectives. We are a platform gathering over 600 signatories from all sectors and layers in society, activists in the women's movement, entrepreneurs, artists, academics, members of parliament, politicians, journalists, and public sector representatives. Together, we bring the knowledge, skills, creativity, goodwill, solidarity, tightly knit networks, and persistence that are both so crucial for development, and they're so rare. Equally, we bring strong awareness that women and minorities have a lot to gain from our EU integration. We will continue to actively support a peaceful, functional, open-minded, and prosperous Europe for all citizens. And frankly, you also need our help as we do yours. A big greeting from all women and men gathered at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Belgrade tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to all our speakers who have embraced the challenge to speak for 2 brief minutes each so that you're watching the live stream can get a sense of the whole without getting lost in details of hugely important topics that we are trying to touch upon tonight. Our panelists will speak in English or Serbian. Feel free to switch to the live stream of your preference, and we welcome your comments and praise. Your questions will be addressed in follow-up interactions. And do let us know if this format works for you. If you're tweeting, please see the hashtags on screen. Please do tweet. We have 4 panels tonight, and we start with panel number 1, Women Hold Societies Together. Our intention is to remind you of the different legacies of the women's movement in Serbia. We hope that this gives us credibility in your eyes so that our ideas on what needs to happen are considered with more fervor. I pass the floor to Zoran Antonijevic, a gender expert who will remind us of our legacy of peace. We're learning time and time again that peace is not to be taken for granted. Here you go, Zorana. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanja. For me, Europe is much more than a continent or the European Union. The Europe is an idea that solidarity and integration could bring peace. It is a legacy of women's movement in Serbia as well, built on 2 main pillars. The first one is combating fascism, and the second one, resolute persistent on a peace politics. After the Second World War, women in Yugoslavia have started many important initiatives. They have been advocating for free and legal abortion, the establishment of nursery homes and kindergartens, and accessible education for women and girls. Since the 90s, women's movement headed by Women in Black organized protests against war under the slogan, "Not in our name." Feminist activists from Serbia took an active role in creating international peace and gender equality framework. Continuously, they are embarking on justice for women victims of sexual violence in war, economic and political equality, and violence against women. Hand in hand with peace politics, women's movement in Serbia has been mobilizing for social change and independent institutions, amending laws, and fighting everyday practices of discrimination. Women's movement is enabling participation of those pushed aside by giving a voice to lesbians, Roma women, and women with disability, promoting fulfillment of our potential for growth and peace. It is the Europe we want to live in, the Europe of equality now and in the future.
You reminded us of nearly a century of women's movement, constant dedication to peace building and cooperation, and this is a good opportunity to wish all Europeans Happy Victory Day and Happy Europe Day on our behalf. So if you want to talk about peace, then do talk to us. Sometimes, you know, we feel like we're talking to ourselves, but not tonight. Another core legacy of the women's movement in Serbia is legacy of fighting violence against women, and it will be introduced by a pioneer in this area, Tanja Ignjatović, who comes from the Autonomous Women's Center.
Thank you, Sanja. If there is anything in common that women have, despite all the differences among them, including the fact or the question of whether we are currently living in the EU or beyond, it is male violence against women. Many decades of organization and networking of women's organizations throughout Europe has contributed to us strengthening our influence and developing strategy together, and the Council of Europe Convention Against Violence Against Women is the result of that networking. And I can proudly say that one of the first synchronized activities in advocating ratification and implementation of the convention that was implemented by 27 women's organizations from many countries, including 3 EU member states, have been coordinated from Belgrade by the Autonomous Women's Center, and I invite you to see the portal potpisujem.org. This convention against violence against women will be our joint women's platform for all other further actions. But however, what we find deeply alarming are conservative and extreme rightist options in the EU, because us here know what effects and consequences of such policies can be. We also find very concerning the fact that the EU lacks mechanisms to prevent undermining and collapsing of European values by its own member states. And under these circumstances, it is essential for us women to boost activism and mutual solidarity. Last year, Polish women reminded us of that. So, streets throughout Europe are ours to defend what we really care about.
Thank you, Tanja.
Thank you.
Thank you. Autonomous Women's Center is a major policy contributor in their area of operation. They're actively engaged in monitoring of implementation of laws, policies, and procedures that directly impact quality of life for women and children, and yet are never enough of a priority. Fighting violence against women is a fundamental development issue for us at the Women's Platform. Still, in the realm of human rights, we now have a statement by Marko Karadžić, human rights defender and former state secretary of a former Ministry of Human and Minority Rights. That ministry no longer exists, it could be telling, and Marko is now living in USA. He lives in Washington, D.C., and if he's watching us now, big greetings from all of us here. Let's hear it from Marko.
I believe in human rights. That's the way I live. Thus, since the early 90s, together with my family and friends, I have been working towards and hoping for Serbia to become one of the EU member states. That was one of the greatest hopes I had. Unfortunately, it's not anymore like that. And that is one of my biggest concerns. It's not about the people. People in the European Union, people in Serbia, Croatia, elsewhere. We have similar issues, similar problems, similar hopes. We want to live in a democratic, respectful, inclusive societies. But sometimes our politicians, or oftentimes, are not actually working towards those issues. When it comes to the European Union, my biggest concern is that people like me, who were supporters, who were working on the EU accession process, are not anymore supportive as we used to be. Suddenly, we have those people who were against the EU, who were opponents of democracy, human rights. Some of them were warmongers during the 90s. They are the partners of the EU. They believe in present-day values of the European Union. While people like me suddenly are just bystanders. We are trying to understand what's going on, who's wrong, and what is wrong.
So now we have a lot to wonder about. And one of the things is our impossible coalitions, the only political reality we're left with. Is solidarity even a value anymore? Is it relevant for Europe that we want to build? And who better to talk to us about these metaphysical questions than a feminist philosopher, Adriana Zakharievic?
Hvala, Sonja. I think we wish to argue for a feminist Europe and an open space of people and not a space of enclosed rivaling nations. A feminist Europe, a space of free people, people who move, work, and associate freely, regardless of who they are, not of free movement of goods and capital. A feminist Europe, a space of equality where each person has the potential to reach his or her potentials. Do we live in such a space? Is Europe such a space today? In Serbia, we know well that feminism has to fight ferociously for equality against war and against poverty. The success of a long-lasting and a demanding fight requires solidarity. During the Great War, early European feminists were often confused who to stand with, their nations in war or their sisters on the other side of the frontier. Let me remind you of the words of Jean Mism, the editor of a feminist journal, La Française, who said, "As long the war continues, the wives of the enemy will also be the enemy." During the 1990s, Serbian feminists decided unflinchingly to stand with women and not with the fathers of the nation. Solidarity across borders has never been questioned, with a view that regardless of the nation, women will bear the brunt of the war scars, ensuing poverty, and unequal treatment of the state. The legacy of that solidarity should keep us vigilant in times of peace too. The vision of a feminist Europe has still not been reached, and in our fragile times, the lesson from Serbia should act as a true signpost for solidarity.
Thank you so much, Adriana Zakharievic, for pointing us in the right direction. We are born Europeans, we know that. We clearly want to join the EU, but what about the EU? Are those dreams of a shared future mutual, or are we only daydreaming? Here is another point in common that women in Serbia share with the EU member states. Well, some of them anyway. We support LGBT rights and minorities. Dr. Zorica Mršević, professor, jurist, researcher, and human rights activist for so many years, will tell us more about that legacy.
Thank you. Well, to begin, firstly, women's movement is and was always a faithful ally to LGBT people and individuals. Women's movement was for sure a safe place for forming of LGBT identity, lesbian and trans women identity, the place for thinking, rethinking, and analyzing position, mutual barriers, mutual enemies, and mutual strategies. If there were not LGBT, if there were not women's movement, many lesbians will spend their life in fear and shame, not knowing that different life is possible. A very important message of women's movement and permanent message is you have right to be different, you have right to be lesbian, you have right to be protected, you have right to be a trans woman, and you have right to have all rights like all other citizens of this country and of Europe. Women's movement was the place of lesbian pride, the place where lesbians can be what they are, to feel protected and not to feel condemned, to feel able to express all their professional aspiration, all their private aspiration. Women's movement was a source of energy to continue with the social changes. Women's movement was a place of meeting of straight women as well as lesbian women, trans women, and all who are different. This is a place of creating a mutual strategy and mutual alliances which will last until we enter in European Union together.
Thank you, Zorica. Care economy is becoming big business in Serbia. It is still predominantly relying on women's free or underpaid labor. Community-based services are developing slowly, and for some groups, like persons living with HIV, there is no clear pathway for licensing of new and innovative services. We're aging faster than most, and we look up to Europe to start working on the problems we're going to face soon. We have with us tonight Đurica Stankov, a multi-talented activist and a person living with HIV, and Nadežda Satarić, a social worker with huge knowledge and energy to look for solutions that give a chance to all. So let's hear it from Đurica and Nadežda.
Hvala, Sanja.
Svakodnevni život postupne. Thank you, Sanja. Everyday life of persons living with HIV is very challenging. Accepting an HIV status at an individual level creates this feeling of rejection, and it is a long process that requires support from family, friends, and social environment. However, due to fear of being discriminated against, those persons often hide their status, and they are quite withdrawn. In fear of being discriminated against by family members, friends, and often healthcare workers, they lead a difficult life. However, I faced that fear, and despite discrimination in the community and poor healthcare reflected in outdated medications and shortages of relevant tests, I have embarked upon proactive advocacy for myself and people living with HIV in Serbia who lack the strength to fight for their own rights. And with the accompanying strategy and action plan implementation, the ROV is still at a very low level. Even though in Serbia treatment is free and accessible to everyone, but it is highly toxic, and after several years of use of that treatment, there are a lot of adverse effects that are very difficult to treat. Therefore, Serbia's membership in the EU, for myself and other people living with HIV or with AIDS or other diseases, will give access to innovative drugs, access to social and legal protection for everyone. This is why I call for improvement of the social standing of persons living with HIV, and we hope and we wish to join forces to build healthy lifestyles, tolerance and equality, to ensure respect for human rights and freedoms, and create an environment where human rights and diversity are respected, and to ensure quality and universal access to social legal protection, because we are born Europeans. Thank you very much. I'm a born European and I feel like a European because we share the same or similar civilizational heritage or legacy and values when it comes to elderly care or children's care or care for the disabled. The brunt of that care has in all times been shouldered by families and mainly by women. Today, due to demographic aging of Europe, where the number of those over 80 years of age is dramatically increasing and they mostly rely on this type of care, we are faced with challenges how to ensure care for all people faced with the shortages of proper resources. Only in the most developed countries there is universal care provided and a lot of resources is allocated to this type of care in local communities. The existing disparities are huge. The coverage of the elderly is between 21% in the Netherlands to 0.3% in Romania, 0.6% in Lithuania, and 1.2% in Serbia. In most countries, the brunt of care for those vulnerable is shouldered by women, either in social welfare institutions, education institutions, or in informal types of care, but their voice is not sufficiently heard. It is essential for us to join forces in finding new, acceptable solutions how to reconcile economic and social aspects in our respective countries. Many European countries, Serbia included, would feel less marginalized if the EU administration's priority would be to design priority policies aimed at elimination or alleviating or reducing the existing disparities among European states. An encouraging initiative in increasing the share of women in parliaments, both local and national, is quite encouraging, and I hope that this will contribute to greater humanization of care and reducing disparities. Thank you.
Thank you, dear panelists of the first panel, for breaking the ice and for being so courageous and on time. Thank you so much. At the end of this panel, we will watch statements by Tanja Fajon, Vice President of Socialists and Democrats Group in European Parliament. It will be followed by a statement by Dr. Zorana Mihajlović, and her title will take a while now. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Construction, Transport and Infrastructure, and President of Coordination Body on Gender Equality. Finally, we'll hear from Maja Bobić, General Secretary of European Movement in Serbia.
What does Europe gain by having a European Serbia? A true friend which respects the rule of law, which enables its citizens to live in a free media environment and which encourages its youth to prosper. Also a rich culture, beautiful landscape and talented and friendly people. What is European about Serbia today? I would say it is a clear commitment of citizens to join the European Union family, which I see especially among young people. Recent protests where a lot of people went out on the streets to express their dissatisfaction about the conditions they live in are also European in a sense that they represent exercise of democratic principles, a cornerstone of the Union. Why is European Union important for women? Because the European Union cares about equality, because it gives women an opportunity to take important decisions on behalf of Union citizens, but also because it finances different programs, both within and outside the European Union, aimed at reaching more rights.
Pa ženski pokret i uopšte rodna ravnopravnost jeste pitanje i osnova razvoja svakog društva. Ako hoćemo da budemo razvijeni, ako hoćemo da idemo napred, ako hoćemo da govorimo o tome da smo mi
true society, then this gender equality is the issue of a modern society and the country that Serbia wishes to be. You know, women are less paid for the same jobs. There are a lot of problems with domestic violence, but Nevertheless, we have made some steps ahead and forward. We started working on it. Over the past 3 years, we have started a strong cooperation with the European Commission. I don't know if you knew, but Serbia is not the member of the EU, but we accepted this index of gender equality, and we work with the EU and cooperate with the United Nations. Of course, there is enough room to improve the cooperation, but we need to work and to recognize women leaders and to employ them more. When I say to employ them, it means to give them the opportunity to work and be paid the same as men. A message for all of us. I believe that we are all Europeans. We need to work together. We cannot talk about gender equality and progress if we are not working together. And this is the message for the women Europeans. They have to stick together, and then they will achieve a lot.
It cannot be highlighted enough. European integration process and perspective of the membership for Serbia and for the countries in the region has proven to be essential for the development of these countries. In the first place, for the development of democracy, then of course for the stabilization and for the peace in the region, and of course as a perspective of some kind of prosperity. The European Union needs to take into account the opinions, the attitudes, the proposals coming from the region when discussing about the future of the EU. Thus, it is very important to include the region, not only the states, the officials, but also the civil society and the citizens in what is to be the landscape of the future Europe, because it does not exist and cannot be fulfilled and complete without this part of Europe. On the other hand, it is crucial and essential for the region itself to recognize the importance and of the responsibility it has towards the European future, not only towards its citizens, in the transformative process of the European integration, but also towards the European integration and to the future of Europe. I would say that it is really high time in this time of multiple crises and challenges that Europe and the region are facing, that we turn back to the basics, to the values. When we discuss about European Union, to turn back to the democracy, to the rule of law, to the values that have defined the very foundation of the European Union, and this is something that will find greater support among the citizens of this part of the world.
So this is our second panel, Women Rule. Even though women are underrepresented at all decision-making levels in Serbia, we want to make a clear point that women are not a vulnerable or marginalized group. We are a majority. Despite obstacles, women rule. Some women are leading positions, and many of them are in the audience and over here. They have accomplished outstanding results. We asked some of them to share their messages for Europe and their ideas on what constitutes a good society. Let's start with Maja Lalic, architect, creative director, and co-founder of Mixer House. Maja will help to demystify the relationship between culture, state, and Europe a little bit, just so that we can start skipping the cliches in our culture policy talk.
Thank you, Sanja, and thank you really for inviting me to such a powerful company and gathering and all. Well, in challenging times such as ours, and not only in Serbia but globally, economic crisis, social crisis, not to mention a political crisis, and not to mention huge movements of people across continents which are affecting lives of many of the European states. We from the culture world, we feel very strongly that some calcified relationships between the state, between the civil organization sector, between the independent culture and the entrepreneurship world are really shaking and changing. And this is leaving a very unwritten rules, new context of emergence of independent initiatives coming from the people, from the artists, from the culture workers who are on one level, they're forced to develop some new mechanisms. On another level, they're really highly motivated to create some new self-sustainable platforms. The official institutions, the governmental institutions dealing with culture are simply losing it. They're losing the connection between real life, connection to the real needs of everyday needs, cultural, intellectual, social needs of people. And we have a completely new world emerging, new organizations developing programs, projects that are often also criticized from the elitistic point of art, because if you're self-sustainable, that's not being forgiven in the cultural world as we know it. So European examples are really valuable to us because we see a lot of out of the silo thinking and a lot of connection between the state, because usually if you're independent, you don't cooperate with the state. So we wish for more public-to-private partnership, and we do feel already European, already thinking in that terms, but we just hope that this practice will come to us as well. Thank you.
Well, we're still talking about successful women, and we do that. We have with us here tonight Nataša Vučković, a Serbian member of parliament. And just days ago, Nataša received a recognition for 10 years of service in Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe. Let's give an applause to Nataša for that. And so, Nataša, are women in politics having a blast? And how important do you think is really the support of parliamentarians for the kind of development that is built on gender equality perspective?
Yes. Well, thank you, Sanja. First, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share some thoughts and messages with you. Let me first say that, well, women parliamentarians have been contributed enormously so far to the adoption of European values in Serbian society. And through international cooperation, through cooperation with our colleagues, parliamentarians from Europe, in European institutions such as the Council of Europe and the OSCE, we have shown that we can work together for the betterment of our societies, that we can promote together the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. And that is very important. And for years, women politicians of Serbia have been working to change the image of Serbia internationally, to present it as a European country, not only by its geography, but more importantly by values that we want to share and nurture in Serbia, in the region, and in Europe. Today in Serbia and in Europe, women have reached high competence in governance, but nevertheless they're easily marginalized. And I think that we in Serbia, as in many places in Europe, we should work together and pay much more efforts in order to use social capital that we have, to use it on the ground of merit base, of competence, and not on the ground of political affiliation to any political party or political movement that is unfortunately become one of the major criteria for one's advancement in professional life. And finally, let me now say a message to our fellow European citizens. Very often today, when we listen to some populist politicians from the European Union who advocate for strong nations and strong leaders, who offer rapid responses and easy solutions to complex problems of nowadays societies, we want to remind them that Serbia at the end of the 20th century has tried some of these strong leaders, strong nations, and easy solutions, and they didn't bring us any good. Today we know that it is only through cooperation, exchange of ideas, through solidarity, and through support of innovation and creativity that we can not only preserve our identity, but also work in order to develop a good society for our young generation. That was my messages to our European colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Tamara Skroza, on my right-hand side, is a journalist we all admire. Tamara is engaged in many media monitoring efforts. So she collects and analyzes evidence on realities that we feel on our skin. Isn't that a beautiful job? Media freedoms are key for development, that much is clear. Yet they're somehow de-emphasized, though mentioned, in our European partnership talks. What can we do about it, Tamara?
We can do a lot. But I would like to emphasize the gender side of things. There are no women's rights in media if there are no human rights in media. In Serbia, at this particular moment, the human rights are in serious crisis. Above all, the level of freedom of speech is not in coordinates with the European ideals and values. Women are actively fighting for media freedoms in Serbia. We are visible, but we have no real power in our hands. Unfortunately, in the situation when one has to fight for his or hers basic human rights, for his or hers freedom of speech, the issue of power is not as important as it should be. EU should start keeping its eyes wide open to human rights issues. It should start keep its eyes wide open to the values that were once the basis of the Union. From the point of view of media in Serbia, from the point of view of human rights in Serbia, it seems that EU somehow forgot about its own ideals and its own principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Well, in one way or another, we're all leaders here tonight. However, there is one among us who stands out as a true European leader. It is Gordana Rajkov. She's a European, regional, and Serbian disability movement activist from the Center for Independent Living of Persons with Disabilities. She was the first ever MP as a wheelchair user in Serbia, and her recipe, if I may paraphrase it, is always be constructive and never let go. And we're so happy to have you here with us tonight, Gordana.
Thank you, Sanja, and good evening to everyone. Since I was born in Serbia, I do feel myself as European, although Serbia is not an EU member country still. For many years, I worked as disability activist, both in Serbia and in Europe. And I was the first ever woman that served as a president of the European Alliance of Muscular Dystrophy Associations. And as Sanja said, the first wheelchair user as MP in Serbian Parliament. For my work in the Independent Living Network as a disability activist, I was humbly admitted to the Hall of Fame, along with many activists in European disability movement throughout Europe, fighting for disabled people to have a choice and to have an independent living. In Disabled People's International, I was trying to raise awareness about double discrimination of women with disabilities, both in other countries and in Serbia as well. In Serbia, among other things, I was developing an innovative social service for disabled people called Personal Assistance Service, which is still lacking in many countries in the region and also in some of the EU countries. Our work was recognized by European UNICEF project as one of the 20 most innovative services, and we will be happy to share our experience with other colleagues in Europe and European Union. My message for this evening will be that people across the whole Europe are facing many challenges. We must look for the good practice, whatever it could come from big or small countries, for rich or poor countries, being a member of EU or not. Because good ideas and initiatives could be born anywhere.
As always, thank you, Gordana, for the mesmerizing vision you always demonstrate. And talking about challenges, a strong civil society, we believe, is another pillar of a good society. But there is another challenge there, the challenge of security that many European countries are facing, which is de-emphasizing focus on civil society in a way. How she does it in security policy and government oversight, we'll hear from Sonja Stojanović-Gajić from the Belgrade Center for Security Policy.
Thank you. I've got a bit broader topic of public policy and oversight, and when thinking about it, I've realized that it's actually women in Serbia that change the rules of the discussion and start discussing not just high politics issue of national identity and sovereignty, but actually of public policy. I don't know for Germany and France, but in Serbian, it's very difficult to translate the concept of public policy. But we as women, we understood that it's actually a discussion about public goods. And economy, welfare, security, foreign policy are too important to be left to just less than half of population to discuss. How many of you present here and there watching have been in a situation where you sat in a room with only men sitting at a panel discussing important matters? Or in a room as tonight, where only women discuss issues of equality and representation of minority groups. It happened to me so many times, especially since I started researching security issues in Serbia, but it also happened to me in a number of European capitals when discussing security. We were cursed and blessed in Serbia that our security institutions have been misused not just against our neighbors and national minorities, but were misused against us, ordinary citizens. And this is the reason why in Serbia we have larger than anywhere in Europe number of civil society organizations that deal with security issues. And this is something where you in Europe can learn from us, actually. So it's not only about asking difficult questions and then about quotas for women in discussing these issues. It's also about the issues that, the questions that we are going to ask. And I think it's important that we ask about position of women, men, boys and girls, because then we see also not just the legal status of affairs, but also informal power distribution. And this is how the public policy should be discussed.
And if you have ever been to Serbia, you know that if there is anything we're proud of, it is the area of sports. We have excellent results in sports, and yet there is a fundamental injustice built in allocation of resources to sports, mostly practiced by women, in comparisons with sports mostly practiced by men. There is so much talk in policies about recreational sports at all ages and for the different groups. And, well, for some of us, it is not just talk. A former EuroLeague and women's NBA player, Slobodanka Tuvic-Maksimovic, now coaches girl in a basketball club she started in Novi Sad. So we want to hear about your experience, Slobodanka.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for this experience. It's totally different than sport, than basketball. During my basketball career, I had a great opportunity to play in lots of Serbian clubs and also to travel in all the Europe and to compete. Life in Hungary, Italy, France, and Poland was a privilege and opportunity to travel, know different cultures, learn different languages, and to have great friends for life. Today, I'm a vice president and a coach of Novi Sad Women Basketball Academy, with ex-basketball players on leading positions and positions of coaching and any other. We teach girls basic of basketball, team spirit, leadership, and to love sport. Girls have opportunity to compete in national, international championships, to know Europe, to have different European experiences. Girls in Serbia today are less physically active than boys. Stereotypes and prejudice, there are more women. I'm sorry. Stereotypes and prejudice that there are more women harder to be in leader position than men. Results are shown usually on the other side. Usually the girls are shown more physical appearance than their results, or teams, or individual sports. There are less money, less conditions, equipment, space, and less opportunity to compete outside of Serbia. There are less women in high position and all levels in sport. These are just some of the reasons why I deal with gender equalities in sport through Center for Affirmation Women in Sport, and I really recognize the importance of a women's platform for development in Serbia, who associate women with sport, in sport, women with other areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I was thinking I would pass on it, but now I cannot. Sonia made a very valid point, and I just want to prove her wrong. We do have men here tonight. If I can ask the cameraman to just show to our European viewership that we do have men. Men, please stand up if you're sitting. Molimo muškarce da ustanu. You're very important to us. Men are our key allies. We know development doesn't happen with just a half of the population involved. That's how we started. So men and women together fighting for equality. But we also wanted to hear from Europeans living in Serbia. And Natalie Ebert is a medical doctor who shared with us her views on how European is her Serbian experience. And we also asked her, what does Europe gain by having Serbia on board? Natalie's story is followed by a mini-movie on an innovative example of women's entrepreneurship. It is a story of a textile recycling factory in Užice, Western Serbia. They're really adorable and you must watch it.
So we moved to Serbia 2 years ago with my husband and my family and my kids. And I have to say I was really amazed by the openness and the friendliness and especially the hospitality of the people here. I have to say my husband works for the Foreign Service, so it's not the first time we moved abroad. But compared to, for example, the United States or even Austria, it was much faster that we kind of like felt at home and were really received by the people in a very cordial way. So I feel, especially due to the fact that I don't speak the language, nearly everyone speaks English here, and I feel very much at home and not like a stranger. So first of all, Serbia is situated in the middle of Europe. So it's surrounded by EU member states and it's part of Europe and somehow really very closely related to the EU. I feel that already now you see in the cultural sector many festivals that take place and integrate shows from all over Europe and the EU. You see it in the same sense in the dance festival, the Bita festival. It's fantastic how EU member states mingle here. And in my work environment, where I work every day, I see many people working for the IT sector, all of them working from Serbia, contributing a lot, especially in this modern market, and again, due to the fact that everyone speaks a fantastic English, they work for companies all over the world, which I guess is something is very important for the EU, and many very well-educated people who will contribute enormously.
Naša osnovna ideja sa reciklažom tekstila jeste u stvari zbrinjavanje tekstilnog otpada. Znam da tekstil je vrlo specifična
management of textile waste. Textile is a specific raw material, and seen from the waste perspective, it contains two categories. One is municipal waste that is collected in households, and it comprises ready-made garments and textiles, and the second category is industrial waste. And in line with technological characteristics of the waste, we have recycled it, and this is a rounded off phase that implies collection of textile waste, followed by sorting of this collected textile, and everything that can be used in the same form we use through our donation service that serves over 200 families in Užice. And the second stage of this project is this workshop that you can see on the screen that is intended for those categories of textile waste where the fabric contains functional properties that can be used to create new products of the same quality as those produced from new raw materials, and they are very suitable for producing toys from recycled textile, or promo totes and bags, or some fashion lines from this range of redesigned textile. And the third phase of our project is that everything in that waste that we haven't managed in phases 1 and 2 will be managed in phase 3 to produce recycled fiber. Recycled fiber is an input for the industry, and international indicators show that non-woven textile is these are fabrics of lower quality, but can be used in the automotive industry, in the construction industry, in heat and sound proofing or insulation. So we are surrounded by recycled textile, but we just don't know that this is recycled textile. For example, in mattresses, you can find recycled textile, or maybe geotextiles, such as the mats that are used or for heat and soundproofing and insulation. In Serbia and elsewhere in Europe, there is an underdeveloped system of textile recycling. We have rounded off the first two phases, but production of recycled fiber will be a major investment in the range of about 180,000 euros. Unfortunately, in Serbia, we still haven't been able to complete this phase because we need investors interested in investing in textile recycling.
Have any venture capitalists listening and watching, please do invest. This is a winner, we guarantee. Our third panel is dedicated to breakthroughs in areas where women, until recently, held supporting roles. They were not involved in decision-making, although they were doing supporting jobs. And we want to make it clear that for us, development leading to quality of life improvements, the kind of development we're looking for, rests upon learning and knowledge, education and freedom for all, growth in creative industries, innovation and entrepreneurship as key drivers, not as supporters. We also see rural development as a key to a secret chest of treasures in Serbia. And we will watch a statement by Ljiljana Gusic, Rural Women's Economic Initiative Vojvodina House from Stanišić. But first, let us start with Nađa Duhaček, who's going to talk about science and knowledge.
So, thank you. As she said, my topic tonight is science and knowledge, and what do women contribute in these fields? I would say everything, But is their work visible in textbooks as kids learn the history of biology or physics, or even social sciences and languages, where students at universities and even professors have been the majority now for decades in some areas? Unfortunately, the history of women's scientific work remains largely invisible. And yet, today, we live in an interesting time when women, especially white women in Europe, face very few obstacles in their formal education. There seems to be an abundance of projects and campaigns to encourage girls and women to get an education and pursue a career in something called STEM, science, math, technology, and engineering. Sounds good, right? The definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. The new result that Europe proclaims is gender equality when it comes to science and knowledge production. And yet, we are witnessing a decrease in funding for social sciences and humanities. And yet, the understanding for ways in which knowledge production is gendered every step of the way in natural sciences and in social sciences comes from social sciences. Finally, I would like to use this short time to also draw your attention to two public debates that exist in Serbia right now. One regards a recent decision by the Ministry of Education to withdraw its support to a set of education packets designed to combat sexual violence against children. Mainly, this support of the Ministry of Education was withdrawn because the packets included an open discussion of gay and lesbian rights. Within days, another petition followed to exclude evolution from the curriculum. Both of these issues deserve and require clear answers from the scientific community. It is indeed an interesting time to be a scientist and a feminist in Serbia and in Europe.
Okay, so coming here, Nadia said she couldn't do a 2-minute format. Well, yes, you can, and you can use it strategically, your 2 minutes, I can tell. And you know, because we have such a dramatic brain drain, people here often say that the best among us have left. So we are merely the leftovers who could not do any better. But we disagree, and we think the changes are made with the willing. So here or there, you're welcome to contribute. Ana Stevanovic is helping other young people find study abroad. As for herself, she decided to work on education from here. Anna will talk about education and freedom for all.
Thank you, Sanja. Women's rights as human rights and fundamental values are again contested in Europe. Women in Europe should act together to stop the strong resurgence of nationalism, xenophobia, and above all, patriarchy. And how to do that better than through education? Women in Serbian education show better results than men, even though institutional barriers that prevent them to fully realize their capacities still exist. Despite the fact that we have less access to resources, mechanisms for integration and protection, we women in education outperform men. The European Gender Equality Index shows that Serbia is significantly behind the EU average. On one side, participation of women in education grows, but on the other, gender segregation in educational fields remains high. Gender equality is not rooted in our education. On the contrary, our children still learn from the outdated books, with embedded gender stereotypes that depict women in their traditional roles. At the same time, our daughters and sisters from marginalized groups face the double and triple discrimination. But women in Serbia share the same struggle as women in Europe. We must regain and protect our rights by connecting and learning from societies that have advanced the position of women in a more systemic and holistic way. And how to do it better than through education. Women of Serbia are part of Europe. We have the knowledge and experience of struggle, leadership, and solidarity. Let's share it and upgrade it and achieve equality together with peoples from Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Nadia. If it isn't clear, we care a lot about knowledge and learning. Not necessarily dual, right? Not necessarily dual, okay. So now we're going to watch Stanisic, the rural women's story that I promised earlier.
Mi razvijamo sela, našu zajednicu, želimo da selo bude prava.
We want the rural areas to be great places for living, to have great infrastructure, transport, access to healthcare and other services that are needed for decent life. In our view, the key to this is economic empowerment of women and economic independence of women, as well as access to knowledge and places of decision-making. We want to elect and we want to be elected as well. And this is why we have launched an economic initiative and we refurbish decrepit households. We grow and process vegetables, help unemployed women to get a job. We're trying to expand this project to involve women from the local community, to prompt them to grow organic vegetables and to have sufficient quantities of products so that we can jointly appear on the market to be competitive, while women who grow organic vegetables can actually generate profit. Our village alone has over 100 abandoned or decrepit houses and farms. We don't identify that as a problem, but as a resource or as a new job opportunity. We have plenty of ideas how to revitalize our community, and we have proved this using our example. So action speaks louder than words, and this is how we're trying to implement our ideas, to take small and persistent steps to change the situation in our local community. We have the same needs as other women: to be free, to have professional and personal development, to be equal, to get education, to have access to culture, to health care, and to have a choice to live in a healthy and environmentally friendly region. And our activities are aimed at achieving these goals. We do not accept the fact that we must accept the existing situation, and all of this, I think, makes us Europeans.
When we talk about innovation, unlike the EU, Serbia's focus on innovation is mostly technological. This is unfortunate because we also have many unresolved social issues, and social innovation ought to be supported along with creative industries and entrepreneurship. And that's why we have with us tonight Nana Radenkovic, who works on cultural projects in Nova Iskra Design Incubator. That's the place that Prince Charles visited on his trip to Serbia. It is a unique place that exudes that new economy kind of energy that we want more of. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm feeling really privileged to come from the area called creative industries, because I feel that in this area I'm privileged to equally collaborate with my male colleagues, and I don't feel any gender inequality. On the other hand, we, coming from creative industries, which is a really vast field, we are pretty much oriented towards Europe and values that it brings into our professions. On the other hand, I think that being in Serbia and in this region of Balkans, it's really challenging to operate in a specific area that demands new trends, innovation, and specific mindset. I think that we all struggle in that field, but what we bring in this area is something new. We develop certain projects, innovative ideas, and collaborations that are responding to certain challenges. And I think this kind of experiences that we bring into creative industry is something that we can share with European Union. And I think this is something that, unfortunately, all of us are living in a really challenging societies nowadays. And this is something that we bring in, and that's like working day to day, trying to be sustainable and responsible as much as possible. So this is what we have to share with Europe.
Thank you. We are honored and very grateful that Maria Neuchel, She's a member of European Parliament, set aside the time to talk to us tonight. And she's from the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. And we want to say thank you, Maria, and dear European friends, we need you and are counting on you.
Liebe Frauen auf dem europäischen Kontinent, Europa bedeutet Nachbarschaft. Frauen als Nachbarinnen von Frauen. Als Mitglied im Ausschuss für die Gleichstellung der Geschlechter im Europäischen Parlament möchte ich 3 kurze Gedanken zum Thema Frauen in Europa darlegen. Eine erste wichtige Frage. Was können Frauen in Serbien durch die EU gewinnen? Ja, ich würde ganz klar sagen, Demokratie, Stabilität und Sicherheit. Denn es liegt in unserem Interesse, diese Vorteile von Europa auf weitere Teile Europas auszudehnen. Für Frauen in Serbien, ich denke mir, ein Gewinn. Aber auch der wirtschaftliche Teil. Seit 2007 ist die Europäische Union der größte einheitliche Markt der Welt, in dem über 500 Millionen Menschen leben, die Hälfte davon Frauen. Dieser birgt wahnsinnig viel wirtschaftliche Vorteile für die Mitgliedstaaten, wenn wir es richtig machen. Und die Werte und die Standards von Europa. Werte und Standards sind der Kitt zwischen uns Frauen. Zum Beispiel die Erhöhung von Umweltstandards in den Beitrittsländern oder die Standards in Bezug auf die Rechte der Frauen und die Gleichstellung der Geschlechter. Denn eines ist klar, Frauenrechte sind Menschenrechte hier bei uns in Europa und weltweit. Eine zweite Frage, nämlich die Frage genau im Gegenteil, was gewinnt Europa durch ein europäisches Serbien? Ja klar, wir gewinnen Nachbarschaft, wir werden mehr, wir werden besser, wir werden größer. Mit 252,5 Millionen Frauen in der Europäischen Union sind wir Frauen in der Mehrzahl, nämlich 51,21%. Und wir wollen Europa gestalten, wir Frauen, mit den
This is really encouraging, and we're saturated with MPs here tonight, which is good. We need their support. One of our friends that we can always count on is Dubravka Filipovski. Hello, Dubravka.
Hello.
Just to make it easier for her and let her enjoy with us tonight, we took a statement from her on the street in front of the parliament. So let's hear from Dubravka Filipovski, a Serbian MP, who is also a supporter of the Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia, member of Women's Parliamentary Network, and a supporter of the disability movement in Serbia.
Najveći doprinos ženskog pokreta u Srbiji je u umrežavanju.
Serbia is in networking, in joint cooperation with the civil society, women in the executive pillar. There is a lot of unused space for that. It is in cooperation with the EU, especially in the area where women and men do the same job but for different pay. So still there is a lot of that, a lot of physical violence in many countries of the EU, and these factors can serve as a good platform for cooperation. Serbia needs to protect its stability and has to be open for any initiatives for the EU.
Thank you, Dubravka, again. Another of our European friends, Sonja Lokar, is the Executive Director, Coordinator of the Ljubljana Southeast Europe Regional Office of the Central Eastern European Network for Gender Issues. Sonja knows us well. We were born in the same country. She supports the Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia as a good model of cross-sectoral cooperation that brings good solutions. And we like what Sonja sees in us. So let's hear it from her.
Europe is a political concept. It is a project of democratic, organized citizens, men and women alike, to live in peace, in equality, and in freedom. A European woman is not becoming a European woman by birth. She's becoming a European woman by her engagement. You, active women in Serbia, has shown us how to organize yourself in a multi-sectoral cooperation. You have shown us how to prepare an European platform for the development of your own country. Even more, you have shown us how to make this platform work, step by step, by mutual cooperation, by mutual acceptance, by women's solidarity, and with persistence. Thank you, women from Serbia. Your approach has become a role model, and your work has become an inspiration to all active women in Europe.
Our European friends, we have now come to the final panel in today's discussion, and we started off from our own experiences because they're so intense and because we do not get to talk about them enough. In this final part, we focus attention on how we want Serbia and Europe to be so that it incorporates women's perspective in development. Our good society is built on the rule of law, on regional cooperation as a precondition of an improved quality of everyday life, on green economy, social innovation and entrepreneurship, water and soil protection, demographic and migrant management, community activism in problem solving, reproductive rights and sexual education, and equal pay. Women in Serbia want a gender-sensitive constitution and the EU integration process. So I pass the floor to Aleksandra Vladisavljević, feminist and entrepreneur, who will start us off on the good economy for a good society. Aleksandra, what do we want?
Thank you. What do we want? Good quality of everyday life this is what everyone will say. But what does it really mean and how to get there? What we offer to you is an alternative to economic reality in Serbia and in the region. Current system does not work well for the citizens. The future, as we see it, should be based on sustainability, innovations and inclusion, core of Europe 2020 strategy and the heart of our platform. To tackle economic and social challenges, we want green jobs, economy based on green policies. We want growth through innovations and entrepreneurship across all sectors in a society. Here are the steps how to get there, and we invite EU to work with us. As a first, we want to build entrepreneurial culture and remove obstacles for micro-enterprises to grow. So the core EU principle, think small first, should from paper move to a practical reality. As a second, we want to set a policy framework for greening current and boosting new green employment. We do have resources for that, both human and natural. We want to invest in innovative policies and solutions fitting our context, capacities and resources. We want to focus on what we have by utilizing untapped resources in both rural and urban areas to benefit citizens and businesses, but preserving natural resources, and we want that future generations have access to rich soil and clear water. It is both development and the human security issue. And at the end, to finally say that in our view, the future is not in the past. And in choosing between the left and right approaches, it is creating a new model where quality of everyday life and equality will replace competitiveness and become a crucial role for Serbia and for Europe. We want to partner with the EU to achieve that in Serbia and across Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. This is eye-opening for me. Let me just quote two things so that we remember they will be stuck with us for a long time. Not to focus on what we do not have, but focus on what we have. And the future is not in the past. I think this is also key for us. Another key aspect of development, and we are in agreement with the EU on that, is the rule of law. It is really a conditio sine qua non of development worth experiencing because there are other kinds of development as well. Rule of law glues societies together in bonds of trust in institutions and among citizens. We are lacking those bonds. Well, perhaps everyone is noticing issues with the rule of law in Serbia, but at the Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia, we're eager to do something about them. Sofia Mandic, lawyer and gender activist on the rule of law.
Hvala, Sanja. In 2014, Women's Platform for Development of Serbia recognized the rule of law as one of the top development priorities until 2020. For women, but other citizens too, rule of law means clear division of powers between legislative, executive and judicial power branch. It also means judicial independence with no exceptions. Today we lack this clear division. For women of Serbia, rule of law means really concrete improvements in creating accessible judicial network, making judicial costs bearable for all citizens. It also means court proceedings organized as fair, finished within reasonable time and with professional, accessible legal aid. Rule of law means law implementation with no exceptions, no matter are those exceptions based on political or personal relations with power structures. Although a candidate for membership in the EU, Serbia still did not fulfill any of the mentioned criteria. In opinion poll conducted in December 2016, 65% of Serbian citizens stated that the structural change of the judicial system or any other big system such as health is independent from the EU accession. It's totally separate in our minds, which is probably fine because we see rule of law as our own battle. Despite citizens' opinion and the ongoing fight for the rule of law, the serious structural change are endangered by the interests of the highest decision makers, unfortunately willing to keep all possible power. This is why citizens of Serbia, but also born Europeans, need help from friends from the EU. We would love to see EU accession process special negotiations on fundamental rights and judiciary more focused on substance and international rule of law criteria and less on technical issues. So, because my time is up, I would like to send a message for the EU and say, please, when you get a chance to talk about rule of law in Serbia, be clear on the real state of play.
Thank you. So we have a great audience, and these are really women of power and men of power, and thank you so much for coming here tonight. Unfortunately, we cannot talk to all of the audience tonight, but there is one way we thought you could say some things, and that is in writing. If you have picked up the little piece of paper and written a word for Europe, what is Europe for you? Now is the time to lift it. So let's send a message. What is Europe? Participation. What else? Can we see? Rule of law. Oh, rule of law, how convenient. Peace. Institutions. Open borders. Human rights. More feminism. I cannot see that one, but you will read it for me.
Smart politicians promoting inclusive development.
Wow, that's really cool. Let's see, what do you have? Oh, it's worldwide. Okay.
Pretty modern.
Pretty modern, okay.
The law.
Uređenost. Some kind of order. Things are in order. We like that. So we have all sorts of different ideas in our heads with regards to what Europe is. And so it isn't, as I understand, only the European Union. We feel born Europeans because we are. But there is another thing. We have new Europeans coming every day. Europe was made through demographic trends of migration and movement of the population. What do we do about them today? Who should we target through demographic policies? Clearly, putting the blame on women does not work. And clearly, quality of life improvements and increased sense of safety and support services do work. But what about migrants? Should they stay or should they go? I throw a hot potato to Vishnja Bacanovic, gender expert from Gender Knowledge Hub, to talk about demographic and migrant management, community activism, and problem solving.
Thank you, Tanya. So, rural depopulation and workforce challenges are not specific to Serbia alone. Unlike the European Union, however, Serbia doesn't see immigrants as a solution or resource. We are always surprised when someone wants to be immigrant in Serbia. Firstly, we don't lack labor force, we lack jobs. Secondly, we don't have a clear answer to the question, why do we need children, except survival of our own nation. Therefore, our demographic measures or policies are aimed to birth for the sake of birth, and therefore they typically result in reproduction of poverty. Migrant crisis management, on the other hand, is also aimed to meeting migrants' most basic needs and to prevent or keeping local population from negative effects, to keeping them sheltered from migrant crisis. We, on the other hand, believe that response to migrant crisis needs to be oriented towards support to local people, local organizations, especially women's organizations, in providing assistance to migrants. This is actually our chance to added value from this situation. And this is the only way actually to make some revival of our local communities. We believe that in highest interest of European Union is to support Serbia in this approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnja. And we are well aware that development isn't only about Belgrade. It's too often the focus of all policies and all investments. We only have friends from Novi Sad mostly and few other cities here tonight. We do have a much broader network, but another thing you ought to know about Serbia is that internal travel is becoming more and more expensive, and so mobility of people is negatively impacted. It isn't cheap for people from Vranje or Kragujevac to come to Belgrade just for a session. So we hope that in future we can address that aspect of migrations as well in a better way. And now we have someone who isn't from Belgrade, Marija Srbić, a longtime feminist from the Center for Support to Women, who will address our positive obsession with regional cooperation and quality of daily life as a key focus of policies and practices. We are learning from you, our European friends, and perhaps it is time to summarize our own lessons learned. Maria, how are the regional crisis centers for women victims of sexual violence moving forward?
Thank you, Sanja. Thank you, Europe Calling. Ovo je prilika da nešto kažemo o svojoj organizaciji, da to Evropa čuje, ali je važno na današnji dan.
For Europe to hear, but today on V-Day, it's important to say that I come from a town that remembers its heroines, such as Lidija Alda, Feš Klara, Slobodanka Acigan. Give them a round of applause, please.
Dakle, dali smo svoje živote i veliki doprinos slobodi Evrope.
Given their lives and their contribution to the freedom of Europe. Since 19th century, us in Kikinda are part of the European women's movement, so we are the followers of a movement that actually created feminism the way we understand it. So these women are our ancestors, our teachers, so we follow their suit to find the best solutions for women in the local community. Together with other women addressing the problems of violence, victim support, marginalized women, women coming from different ethnic minorities, stand united together with other women in the region and elsewhere in Europe. We set up new centers in Vojvodina. So, using or inspired by French, Dutch and British organizations, we set up centers for rape victims, and we hope to have 7 such centers in the future and to share that experience in the region as well, because it will be most beneficial. So we want Europe of freedom, Europe without borders, Europe without fear, that links us and unites us rather than separates us.
That activist energy, I have to stand close to her. So what is the relationship between reproductive rights, sexual orientation, and development of a good society? We have an artist among us, Ana Rodic, and they say artists see things more clearly and without learned social inhibition. Is that so, Anna?
I hope so. Okay, thank you, Sanja. Thank you. I prepared some messages, but before I start, I would like to say a few words about power of words, about tone of communication, and about language we are using. It seems that recently, when we are talking about serious matters, we are using the language of diplomacy between ourselves. And I don't think it's the right thing. I believe that we are warriors in the space of human rights, and that we should choose words, rough words, and that we should use humor when we communicate as a communication tone, because humor is the easiest way to reach people, especially the ones who are living in injustice and they are not aware of it. I think that we should break taboos by repeating them constantly, by mocking on them, on taboos. I think we are in war against ignorance and injustice, and let's win it with the right words. And so my messages. Okay, understanding means a lot more than just speaking the same language. It's an act of equal thinking in the same moment with the same people. As good as it feels to say yes, it's equally important to say no. Reproductive rights are clearly the question of freedom, which include both man and woman. We know how to solve the problem, but we cannot do it alone. We all share the same planet. We all share the same problem. Thank you.
Anna, thank you very much for the importance of saying no. And as a matter of fact, in our maturing relationship with other Europeans and EU countries in particular, it has been hard to say no. And we must learn to say no with confidence when we think it's good for our development. So we keep coming back also to equal pay and economic empowerment. Let us recap. What is it really in the European context? Where does Serbia stand? And what do European women want? We have Milena Rikanovic from UN Women program in Serbia.
Hello, welcome to everyone. And how can I start? Serbia women and girls share the values of European women, and we are European women, so we share the values with women from other European countries, and that is full economic and social rights for women and for men. However, we do see and we do share the problems, we do share the challenges, and we see different position of women and men in Serbia and in all European countries. We see the difference in employment rates. We see the difference in property. There is a gender pay gap all around Europe. And the reality of men and women around Europe is the same. We have been asked, are we part of the European Union? And I have to say yes, because women in Europe are already part of the Union through this and through many other networks. We already joined forces in combating discrimination at the labor market. We are already together in trying to reconcile private and work life. We are already trying together to address a pay gap. Is there a glass ceiling in France? Yes, there is. Are we fighting there together? Yes. Are we part of the Union? Yes, as well. So this platform, Europe is our platform for development. And this network is a women platform for development in Serbia, which is equally part of the Europe. What would be my message? I have been asked to share the messages, and I think that after Anna, I can clearly say that we have to call Europe, but Serbia, decision makers and public, to recognize women productive rights and women productive role. We are not just in a reproductive field. However, we have to recognize that as well. We have to recognize that we have a clear and very important role for development of Serbia's society. Can European Union succeed and progress without Serbian women, girls? I would say no. And can we solve the pay gap? Again, no, without the support of European Union. So yes, that would be my messages. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's work on that pay gap with UN Women's support. And we come to our most European claim, dear European friends. We want a development-oriented and gender-sensitive constitution of Serbia and EU integration process. We have already started to mainstream equality in pre-accession programming, and that is great. But it's only a beginning. It is innovation, it is a breakthrough, but it's only a beginning. Let us hear where we're headed next from Dr. Marijana Pajvančić. She's constitutional law professor and activist of the Women's Platform for the Development of Serbia.
Hvala, Sanja.
Thank you, Sanja. A big job is ahead of us this year and the next as citizens of Serbia, together with those that we have elected, should actually adopt a social contract and sign a constitution. For the Women's Platform, this is the key issue of paramount importance. Why is that so? Because the constitution that I suppose will be adopted, we want this constitution to be a constitution of the 21st century. This means that this constitution, apart from traditional constitutional values, protection of human rights and determining human liberties and freedoms in a political community, this constitution should also assume a developmental role to protect what constitutes our natural material resources and to activate the overall human potential. Why is this maybe the most important issue in Serbia? When such a big document is being adopted, you have to be aware of the social circumstances. And Serbia is a society that lacks social prerequisites for a constitutional state. We may hope for the constitution to be like that if such prerequisites are created. This is a key issue that we need to bear in mind, and the Women's Platform should also bear that in mind when insisting upon development. So this can create development if we are all involved in this. And we have to take into account the context of all the countries in the region, and as well as all the obligations and commitments that we have assumed as members of different international organizations. And also European values, it's a huge job, and the Women's Platform will seek to actively involve all of you, not just because you need to be involved, but because this is our right. And we have a say when it comes to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marijana, and thank you all for being with us tonight. We enjoyed this opportunity to contribute as citizens of Europe tremendously. Talk to you soon. Have a good evening and come to Serbia, even if you are from here. Have a good evening.
Sad bi bio red da ja nešto kažem. Kratko. Pošto možda ne znate, ali evo za mjesec dana bit će tačno 21 godina kako
1 month's time, it will be 21 years since I have been working for Friedrich Ebert. I was young, pretty, and smart when I joined the PES. We've done a lot of useful and important things, but the long road is still ahead of us, so join us in our building of a better society in Serbia. I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank our interpreters who have made sure to convey all those messages to Europe. I'd like to thank the technical team and their support.
Hvala govornicama koje su bile divne
i
koje su se zaista divno spremile da uveličaju ovaj naš događaj danas. Hvala svima vama što ste došli večeras.
Tonight, I'd like to thank my colleagues from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. We couldn't have done it without you. And now I'd like to invite you to a light buffet celebrating our becoming of age.
When I was a little girl, I had a rag doll, only doll I've ever owned.